Welcome to History Lab Originals. I'm Tamsin Peach. The story of Australia's response to AIDS is often told as a national success, a story of leadership, smart public health policy, and successful community engagement. But what happens to this story when you zoom in and examine what it looked like up close? In Darlinghurst, the heart of gay Sydney, the AIDS crisis unfolded in a dense neighbourhood that in the 1980s was bursting with new forms of queer life. Over 3 episodes, historian Leigh Boucher will take us onto those streets and into the gyms and dance parties that were home to so many young men and women. By talking to those sometimes marginalised in the story of national success, he asks how might their voices force us to revisit a history we think we know.
So we used to sit down every night at this cafe, at the fountain, and the whole world will go past you from the gym. Yeah.
You're bumping into people constantly.
That's the word, bump. And that bumping goes from one person to another. It's a bit like ants, you know?
If you live really in the inner city, you're walking, and so you see the street in a different way.
That circle of King's Cross, Darlinghurst, Surrey Hills, there was a lot of movement backwards and forwards. People walking to and from the cross, the wall, all of that. It was very cruisy, busy. You know, nice things often happen in back lanes. People make out in back lanes. People, you know, smoke drugs in back lanes.
I'm in Green Park in Sydney. There's quite a few massive Moreton Bay figs. There's a rotunda in the middle. Paths cross this park on the diagonal. There's a few memorials dotted around. But what these memorials don't tell us is that this is a pulse point of queer history in Darlinghurst. So much has happened here over the years. Protests and marches have ended up here, placards dropped on the ground after a few hours of exhausted chanting. On one side of the park, there's the infamous wall, which is where male sex workers used to gather. It was also once the site of Darlinghurst's most popular beat.
That beat, there could be 500 people there, picking each other up and cruising up and down the street and chatting each other up and disappearing off.
When Gary was finding fun in Darlinghurst in the 70s and 80s, both at the beat and elsewhere, this had become the gay heartland of Sydney. Queer folks from all over the country were drawn here, and they kind of took over. It had been transformed from a gritty working-class suburb into what scholars would later call a gaybourhood. A few precious square kilometres where a queer world was being built. Today it still feels a little bit like a place where gays make the rules, and that's why I was drawn here. As an historian, though, when I walk around, I feel like I'm bumping into memories of queer world building. I can locate myself in this big historical story about queer life in Darlow, and it feels really special.
Darlinghurst is where I want to go.
But I'm not sure the people who walk through this park every day on their way to work or around these streets have that same feeling and knowledge. I'm not sure they realise how thick with queer memory Darlinghurst really is.
And that bumping goes from one person to another.
Leigh Boucher lives and breathes Darlinghurst. It's a small inner-city neighbourhood of Sydney, just east of the city. Leigh's an historian, and across a year, he spoke with people who lived through the worst years of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. They danced in the clubs, they worked out in the gyms, and they cared for their friends and lovers. We walk these streets with Leigh and dive into the archives as he uncovers the very local and intimate AIDS story that unfolded right here in the place he calls home. Welcome to this very special series of History Lab. I'm Regina Boutros.
Because I research gender and sexuality in Australia, I'm very familiar with a national story about the devastating impact of the AIDS crisis on gay men. The other big story is about the effectiveness of the Australian response to the AIDS crisis. This response brought together activists, doctors, and political leaders to get on top of the epidemic more quickly than anywhere else in the world. But I've always wondered, what was it like to live through this crisis in what soon became its Australian epicentre? What did it mean to have your recently formed queer world threatened by what early reports described as a gay plague?
The story of the AIDS crisis that emerged in the 1980s is often focused on the experiences and memories of the players, people like the activists and community leaders, as well as some political leaders and experts. In a lot of ways, these are the heroes of the Australian response to AIDS. But there are stories we haven't heard before. So we're winding back the clock to the 1970s, when Darlinghurst became a magnet, pulling people from all over the country and beyond, seeking something different. Excitement, experimentation, freedom.
There was just a feeling that...
This would be the kind of mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Bruce Carter grew up in working-class Balmain, Sydney. He started hanging out in Darlow in his youth.
I would have been 15. I kind of looked older. I was shaving quite young and stuff like that. So I discovered beats, and I think I'd just tell people I was a uni student or something if I went home to someone's flat, and I did that. I did go to visit a man in Clapton Place, Darlinghurst.
Lizzie Griggs landed in the neighbourhood from Narrandera in rural New South Wales and quickly formed a crew.
I think my first gay cultural experience on Oxford Street was when I was 14, and this friend Gabriel took me to Capriccio's. I loved it. It was like you were totally accepted for who you were, and there was just this instant sense of like-mindedness.
So I'm talking with folks who lived here, not the usual activists and community leaders, but those who watched that political world out of the corner of their eye. Folks like Pierre, who bumped into his friends on the street after working out at City Gym.
As a Lebanese gay guy who came out in the gay scene about his sexuality, which was a big thing for me. It was a no-no, it was unheard of.
Pierre Toomer worked as a barman by night and trained by day at City Gym, which was in the centre of Darlinghurst.
And it was beautiful. I lived a very fast life, working on Oxford Street. It was a wonderful time, wonderful time. Darlinghurst back then, you have to remember, especially Oxford Street, the Golden Mile, it was hustling and bustling with the restaurants next to each other from all over the place. All kind of food. And you couldn't move. That's how busy it was. You know, every single night was full of people. It was a wonderful thing for me, to actually grow up under the mirror ball. So I hang around with my gang, and you'll bump into those people, you'll bump into those people, at the dance floor, and your photo get taken all the time, and you say hello to everyone, and you come back home with 20,000 phone numbers in your pocket.
People like Pierre often remember the golden years of queer Darlinghurst with its dance floors and bars as a social world filled with gay men, and maybe a few lesbians as well. But there are straight women on those dance floors too. I know this because there are quite a few straight women in and around the dance floors that I enjoy most weekends. So, even though historians might not normally consider heterosexual women to be central figures in a queer story, I want to hear from women like Lizzie, Sarah and Tess, who all found friendship and fun in this queer world.
I became part of a friendship group that were mostly gay men, a couple of lesbians, and we moved in a pack from, maybe 79. There was a couple of heterosexual women, myself and my very good friend, my soul sister at the time. And so we were protected and looked after.
Tess Sims will become one of the many carers who stepped up to provide support for the sick. But in the late 70s, she and her friends were turning heads up and down Oxford Street.
Yeah, I think, our little group became quite well known for always sticking together. Sure. Oh, here they come, that kind of thing. So that was really nice.
As it turns out, I found that straight women I interviewed, like Tess, looked back on these years with a little less nostalgia than some of the gay guys I spoke to. Their memories didn't have that rose-tinted glow about pleasure and acceptance in the gaybourhood. Tess, for example, was really attuned to the ways in which some gay guys didn't feel like they belonged.
There was certainly the culture of beauty. I mean, we've all seen it, buff, the moustaches and the right jeans and the right leather. And if you weren't like that, if you were a skinny little 22-year-old with pimples, you didn't stand a chance, not a chance of even approaching a community in a way, Like, what the fuck are you doing in here, you little shit? Piss off, The poor little soul, I'm just trying to have a gay life. Yeah, fuck off. So to say it was all sweetness and light is crap.
The word that is often used to describe Darlinghurst in the late 1970s is the gay ghetto. And that's a very powerful word. Inside a ghetto, it's safe. Outside it, it's not. We're also looking at a period where sex between men is still illegal. So yes, this is a space of safety, experimentation and possibility. And outside it is incredible hostility.
Sarah Lubowitz would become part of the neighbourhood's response to AIDS, both as a community worker and as an activist. She moved to Sydney from southwest London in her early 20s and hung out with a queer crowd, in part because her boyfriend was bisexual.
So suddenly I'm now in this group of maybe 8 gay men, most of them from Queensland, but not all of them. And we just would go for dinner together, we'd go to parties together.
And this is all around kind of Potts, Darlinghurst, Paddington, in that kind of part of the world.
Oh, yeah. And then we were walking up Oxford Street and we were saying goodbye to this guy because he was going to go into Patches. And we were standing in Oxford Street waiting with him in the queue. And this car came past and screamed, "You fucking puffed as fucking..." And I remember just feeling really, really scared. Like, and his friend shouted saying at the car, I'm thinking, oh my God, don't let the car stop, So that's the first time I kind of understood that we were standing in a different place than those people in the car.
Gary Dunn moved to Darlinghurst from Adelaide and got a gig as a reporter at the Sydney Star Observer, a local gay street rag. We'll visit the Star again very soon. Gary reported everything from gossip to crime.
You mentioned the word safety, a feeling like Darlinghurst is a space of safety, and I'm guessing you're describing the kind of late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, that's a tough one because there was also that whole period of the murders and all of that and being at the Star when all that was going on. And again, that was difficult, really difficult because we knew what was going on and we can't say, don't go to Wicks Beat, in Wicks Park because there's bashers there. Because if you actually put that in, you're actually identifying where the beat is. And it's a free newspaper, so the chances are you're actually telling the bashers where to go as well.
So even though all my interviewees talked about Darlinghurst as a space of excitement, possibility, liberation and safety, we also know that, one, outside the ghetto, that's not how the world looks. But also that outside world can impinge into the ghetto in all kinds of ways. There's a police station with cops who'll still arrest you for public indecency, who will harass you if you're looking a little bit too gay, who will in fact stop your parade in 1978. The emergence of the ghetto also means that people know where to find gay men if they want to bash them.
It was a really difficult, and covering some of the court cases were just horrific. I still shudder because we'd see photographs, you'd see stuff that didn't make it into print, and particularly a couple of the ones in Alexandria, the murders were just, somebody's had boot print, they'd been jumped on their back, and the bruising had come right through their body and on the front.
It's shocking to consider that this was happening at the time. The everyday harassment of gay people was pervasive. But the gay ghetto was brimming with energy as new gay businesses, restaurants, bars and clothing stores sprung up. And soon there was a gay newspaper to chronicle the action, That was the Sydney Star Observer. Sometimes you'll hear us refer to the paper as the Star Observer, the Star, or the SSO for short. It was started by a local man named Michael Glynn.
Standing in front of a pretty classic Darlinghurst double-storey terrace here on Crown Street. This was the building in which Michael Glynn first published The Star. Its office was in his front lounge room, which I can actually see through the window there. The first few issues looked pretty raggedy, actually. They looked like an activist newspaper, and Glynn would hand them out for free out the front of the Tropicana, which is just up the road. But soon, Glynn's vision began to succeed. His motto was think gay, buy gay, and there was plenty of businesses who were really keen to advertise in The Star. And historians describe newspapers like these as bar rags because they're distributed for free in the bars, the clubs and the cafes. I've got the most recent issue of The Star in my hands, and in many ways I think it looks like The Star that Glynn imagined. It's got listings of community events. There's a story about Acon's 40th anniversary. Yep, lots of pictures of hot men from the clubs last week. It's advertising lots of gay and lesbian local businesses. That was the kind of paper that Glynn imagined. But Glynn's project was quite radical. He was trying to tell gay stories on gay terms. It did kind of cater to Glynn's own tastes, which were leather and clones. The gay men in Darlow, they lapped the publication up. They loved picking up The Star to see pictures of last week on the dance floor, and it always provided a pretty reliable account of what was going on around the hood.
For Gary Dunn, our reporter, writing for The Star was an early step towards a career as a novelist. His columns would go on to become fodder for his fiction.
I wanted to interview Gary because he wrote 3 wonderful novellas that told the story of Darlinghurst in the AIDS years. These feel like novels written in the voice of the Darlinghurst that I know.
Oh, I can admit it now. I wrote the gossip for The Star for about a decade, and I wrote it before I knew anybody. Dot used to come in and just tell me all the things that had happened, and I turned into something witty and work out how to do it so we don't get sued.
Here's one from 1986.
Fleshy entertainment of a less serious nature has been happening over at the Town Hall Hotel, where it would seem anything could happen. And it does. The other Sunday, they had a best buns competition. Personally, I went for Butch Ethnic George, who, much to my horror, got very girly out in the street. Anyway, we all know it's the face that counts, and that's what I'll be looking for at the sleazeball.
Gary's gossip column reveals something really important about The Star. It was a paper that spoke in the sex-positive language of the gaybourhood. Advertising for sex workers, venues, legal services, and even dentists often featured a hot torso or two. These pictures also chimed with a kind of bodily aesthetic that was becoming a new feature of gay life in the early 80s. This was a new style of gay masculinity. It was leaning hard into quite macho stereotypes about bodies and styles of dress. These tight white singlets also required quite a bit of time at the gym.
The lives and stories and bodies that appeared on The Star's pages represented new ways of being gay. One of the more prominent types that was featured was the gay clone. Think Freddie Mercury, handlebar moustache, tight white t-shirt and fitted jeans.
A place that I worked at was the Cricketers Arms in Surrey Hills, Patches, Capriccios. Then there was the Beresford that opened.
Frank McCabe, like Pierre, worked out at City Gym.
Everyone wore 501s, a white Bonds t-shirt with a blue Bonds singlet over top. And everyone wore it. And then you had, depends what you're into, which kind of hanky you had hanging out the back pocket. And then when I Can't Stop the Music came out, that movie, man, everyone was dressed in, you know, you're either the construction worker or the leather man or the full on.
In the early 80s, an article from Campaign.
If you know what to look for, you can recognise each other in the street. You don't have to exchange furtive glances at the traffic light anymore to check whether he's one of us. His clothes tell you 100 metres away To be a clone is to be as openly homosexual as a participant in a gay rights march.
Some activists weren't such big fans of the clones. They looked at their bodies and clothes and thought, these guys are just buying into a bunch of hetero stereotypes. And I reckon that critique had a point. And the world of the clones didn't make a lot of space for guys who couldn't pull off the look. So much for community. At the same time, though, I wonder if this all might be reading these clones a bit too literally. When I look at their pictures, they seem a bit more like drag queens. I wonder if there's a bit of a knowing wink going on here, a little bit of irony. I'm spending a lot of time working through the digital archive of The Star, patiently waiting for those pictures of hot men to load on my screen and reading Gary's gossipy accounts of last weekend on Oxford Street. I feel a bit like an ethnographer, slowly recreating an enclosed social world. Hang on. Who's this?
In praise of hunks. Sir, I would like to compliment you on edition number 14 of the Star Observer. Although the articles are always great and informative, you really excelled yourself with the pictures of Peter Vincent and friends.
Suddenly, Peter Vincent appears like a bolt of lightning on the cover of an issue from 1985. He's pictured in a pair of Speedos and a tight white tee. I'm finding it hard to ignore these impressive calves and bulging Speedos. I immediately clip his picture and text it to my partner, who promptly responds,
"He's hot." Wait, you do realise you look alike, don't you?
Guys in the neighbourhood were similarly taken by Peter's photo.
Peter Vincent, an entrant in last year's Mr. Gay Sydney, turns heads anywhere, even when he's not wearing a Mr. Gay Australia t-shirt. Bodybuilding is not only a sport and an art, but also a lifestyle for rapidly growing numbers of men. It can help affirm and celebrate positive gay identity and provide a counterpoint to the negativity and homophobia mobilised by the AIDS crisis.
The reference to AIDS has piqued my historian's antenna. It's 1985, and that imagined threat of AIDS has become very real in Darlinghurst. There's something in Peter Vincent's story that feels worth following up. His body alongside those words about the AIDS crisis get me thinking, how did this catastrophe unfold on the gym floor, where vitality and muscularity are pursued and celebrated? Was there room for a body with AIDS in that gym culture? So I make a post on Facebook in the Lost Gay Sydney group. Hi all, I'm doing some research into gym culture in Sydney in the 80s and a name keeps popping up. I'd love to find out anything I can about Peter Vincent, who was a trainer at City Gym in the 80s and competed in the physique competition at the Gay Games. As far as I can tell, he moved to Sydney from New Zealand in the mid to early 80s. Any help, much appreciated. Pierre responded in a matter of days.
There used to be a gym underneath the Hilton Hotel called John Valentine Gym. And that was where I used to go and train. And right next to it, there used to be a gay sauna called the Roman Bath. So I went to the Roman Bath and I bumped into this Kiwi guy. He was on holidays. It was so funny because Peter is actually a clown. He's the light of the party. You know, he was always making jokes and making everyone feel good. And we exchanged numbers and everything. I knew he's going to be a good friend, you know. He's not someone that you're going to have sex with, but someone you're going to be a real friend with because he's real. And then he came back to live here. He came for opportunities like any young gay man trying to discover himself.
I also heard from a guy called Frank McCabe.
I think it was 82 or 83. I was up at the midnight shift. I thought, I have to know who this person is. He is beautiful. He had a cowboy hat on, a straw cowboy hat, a white singlet on. I think it might have had Gold's Gym on it and a pair of really tight 501s. And I walked up to Peter and just said hi to him. And the next day I went to the gym and he was at the gym. We got a name. You know, here they come, the Muscle Marys. He had a really good sense of humour. We'd meet at the gym. And during the summer, we went to Redleaf Pool every day, or Bondi, or Tamarama, one of the three. We'd hang out there and sun ourselves. I'd actually fallen in love with Peter.
Training? Are you training? Why don't you do training with us? What are you talking about? We're all being Muscle Marys. What are you talking about?
I'm here at City Gym, where Frank and Peter worked out. Like them, I know what it's like to develop a bit of a gym crush across those squat racks. It's a bit like a cave in here. It's got low ceilings. It feels like something like a nightclub. The music's pumping. The boys are pumping their muscles. It's actually got great lighting. Perfect for a selfie in the mirrors after a good workout. The people in here, it's mostly gay guys. It's super social. Everyone's chatting. It feels like everyone's also kind of checking each other out as well. The pictures of Peter make me think he would have slotted right in here. Although, as I look around, I can't really see anyone whose calves are as good as his. I'm standing here today on another pulse point of queer history in Darlow. Another space thick with memories of queer joy, queer friendship, and maybe even a bit of queer sex.
Peter was a well-known figure at City Gym. He took his body seriously and won quite a few bodybuilding comps. He also became something of a poster boy for the gym in the pages of the Star. Once he started working there around 1984, there are plenty of half-page photos of him in skimpy gym wear, extolling the virtues of working out.
When Peter arrived on the scene, working out at the gym had only just become popular amongst gay men. Before that, the standard clientele of the gym was probably King's Cross heavies and bodybuilders from Western Sydney.
And it turns out that Peter and Pierre were crucial to making City Gym into a gay-friendly space.
Peter was the first one who started recruiting people. We'd go out dancing, Between us, we started bringing people bit by bit, and it became what it is. It was like a little private club. Everyone knew everyone. You go to the gym, you're interacting 100% with your training and talking with people all night long, laughing and exchanging ideas about the gym, not like now.
What kind of music was he playing in the gym?
House. Girl, the party is here.
Yeah, sure.
That sort of thing.
Big vocal house.
Yeah, we love music. We both love music,
I'm here at the Paddington Town Hall, which is where Peter competed for Mr. Gay Sydney. It's actually also another one of these pulse points of queer history. This is a space where the first dance parties and social gatherings were held for lesbians and gays in public in the 1970s. It's also a crucial space where activists came together throughout that decade to strategise. Back in 1984, though, Frank McCabe was here, competing in the very first Mr. Gay Sydney.
We represented the Oxford Hotel. There was my ex-partner, who was the priest, myself, Peter, another guy called Vince Kelly, he's dead now. Each hotel had competitors, and then they'd pick one who represented that hotel. Then they had the big finale at the Paddington Town Hall. It was like Miss Australia, We had to wear all different clothing, like street clothing, fantasy clothing, Speedos, yeah. I took mine off. I was hoping to win, but I didn't win. I didn't.
The Paddington Town Hall Ballroom was also the site of some of the most outrageous gay dance parties, including the very first sleazeball, which was a raging success.
And dancing back then was essential, was quintessential. To go to a dance party, you'd be dieting to go for a contest. And when you are down to the last 3 kilos, what we do? I'm competing tomorrow morning, right? There was only back then, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, there was speed on the market.
Yeah, sure.
That's the only thing you take. You take a lot of speed, you go to train, and you go to the dance party with your friends, and you dance your ass off till the next day, and you go to the competition from there. And you look like a prune. Yeah. You're shredded.
Well, Peter was going for a competition.
Frank McCabe.
And he had to get he had big calf muscles, but he wanted to cut them up. So he would take a little line of speed, and then he would get in a really high pair of high heels. He'd go into the fire exit and run up and down the stairs. And of course, he wouldn't be doing it quietly either. We'd be screaming and laughing, and Peter would, we have music blaring. It was funny. It was lots of fun.
Peter, Frank and Pierre were clearly making the most of life in the gaybourhood. And I think I know how that feels. It feels like possibility and liberation, bumping into friends, and sometimes feeling a bit sorry for the straights who don't get to have so much fun. But around the same time that Peter arrived in Australia and Frank was competing in Mr. Gay Sydney, news of a mysterious gay cancer was beginning to spread around the neighbourhood. It was clear from those early reports that this sickness could ravage the bodies of once vital young men.
In July 1981, the Sydney Star Observer published its first story about what would later be known as HIV/AIDS. It's on page 2 under a large ad for midnight shift, with a half-clad man in chains. Ladies welcome Wednesdays. It's in international news. It's very small down the bottom. It's titled, New Gay Pneumonia Linked to Gay Lifestyles. It's a very brief report.
No one knew what was going on. I went to America in 1983, and I came back and I said to Peter, there is a disease in America. Because up till then, the gay scene was you catch the clap, you go to the doctor, you fix yourself, 2 weeks later you're on the market again. That's how it was. There was nothing else, So if you got the clap, you will call someone that you had sex with, and you tell them, if you do, well, I did, so they can go and fix themselves, because the scene was very tight back then. Everyone knew everyone,
The following year, 1982, the paper sounded the alarm about a rare disease, which often first manifests with mysterious purple lesions. Gary Dunn from the Sydney Star Observer.
What happened with HIV was we, as a group of gay people, we were living in this totally different universe. People getting sick, but nobody else knew. It wasn't happening. It wasn't recorded anywhere. It wasn't being talked about. And there were people at the pub were saying, this was the Town Hall Hotel, which was gay, saying, look, we don't want to know about this. We're going to have a party. This was really early. So I wanted to work out what the fuck was going on, and we didn't even have the words for it. And what is it? Like, we didn't know what it was. I had friends who were getting sick, and at that stage I was doing nursing, and it was like, there's something going on here. And I've got notes in one of my diaries about one of the ex-boyfriends saying, look, I just sweat at night, and I've been tested, and I haven't got hepatitis, and what do I do? So I guess it was this sense of unease. I came at it from a nursing angle and thought, well, I'm not sure whether it's in the amyl or whether it's in semen or whether it's in blood or whether it's in urine, but either way, I'm going to have to shut the legs, and we only do drugs up the nose. We don't IV anymore.
Bruce Carter.
I remember when I first heard about this thing that was killing gay men. So I was still living at home, and it was through Gay Waves on a Thursday night.
Gay Waves is a community radio show on 2SER. It first started broadcasting in 1979.
And they had a section which was global news. And then I remember an RN saying to me, so I was a student nurse, something weird's going on. We've been getting these gay guys coming in and getting pneumonia. It didn't take long to realise that, this is really serious. And you start hearing stories and you start seeing people around.
Tess Zims.
First heard about gay cancer in Campaign, the magazine in the early 80s, a newspaper. So that was splashed across the headline, And it was just gay men and...
Were you scared for your mates?
Not then.
Yeah.
No, not then. It wasn't until maybe 83, 84 that I started to think, oh, shit, people are getting this thing. What are my boys doing?
By 1983, this mysterious gay cancer had a name, AIDS. An article from the Sydney Star Observer that year described a crippling and seemingly fatal disease that had stricken more than 1,300 people in the US, with more than 300 gay men having already died. Early medical reports suggested that fewer than 14% of patients survived more than 3 years after the first appearance of symptoms. In Darlinghurst, the newly formed AIDS Action Committee invited a panel of medical experts to explain what the disease was. Gateways was there to report in the media. Here's Dr. Jim Curran from the Communicable Disease Research Centre.
Some gay men, and especially after the ones who just listen to what I have to say, feel that it's inevitable that everybody will get infected and a number of people will die. Because people feel that 25% means that everybody...
I'm back at Paddington Town Hall.
If 25% of the people have, that means...
When activists decided to call a meeting about the threat of AIDS, the ballroom here was the obvious choice. Everyone knew where it was, and everyone knew this is where queer politics and community building happened. As soon as the reports about this gay cancer had emerged, misinformation and homophobia echoed around Australian life.
Everybody knows you can't influence people's sexual behaviour.
The stakes felt really high. Callers into Radio Talkback asked whether they might catch AIDS from a toilet seat or whether they should make sure they didn't shake the hands of a gay man. So the activists brought together 5 medical experts to inform the gaybourhood about the nature of this threat. The ballroom was filled to capacity, mostly of gay men desperate to hear reliable information about how this virus was transmitted and whether there might be any possible treatments.
A record of that meeting is preserved on an old VHS tape that Leigh unearthed during his research. Here are just some of the questions and answers that filled the town hall that night.
The only known treatment is a compound of courage, intelligence and patience.
Now, how do we go about trying to diagnose a disease of which we have no cause?
That's Australian immunologist Dr. Ron Penny. He was on the panel of doctors taking questions from the crowd.
We have no knowledge of what it is, and it's very clear that all the data that has been derived in the United States is derived heavily biased towards the New York incidents, where, of course, more than half the patients have so far come, or slightly less than half the patients.
There is misinformation, and there is no simple way to get rid of misinformation.
The aim is to try and determine whether the gay community in this society is at risk of acquiring the disease.
It seems that this disease can be transmitted during anal intercourse. What is the incubation period?
The incubation period seems to be variable.
My grandmother, she was informed that it would not be safe to operate at the Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney, as the risk of contamination would expose her to a risk of contracting AIDS, as the place was full of it.
An eminent British scientist, female without person, has suggested that male homosexuals use condoms during intercourse to lower the incidence of, or the chance of contracting AIDS. Is that a valid suggestion?
I'm getting into the firing line here. A lot of people have made a lot of comments on prevention, and those who know me know that I have never made a single reference to prevention because I don't know what to prevent.
And I said to her, there's something going on in America, man. You know, like you have sex with someone and you die eventually. No, it's not happening. And then came to Sydney a year later. And the first prominent case in Sydney everyone knew was Bobby Goldsmith. You know.
And so do you feel like Peter was scared? Like in the late 80s, you know, so... You know.
He was a little bit. It was a time where you really have to come to terms with yourself. It was a time when, you know, people were coming out of the woodwork and confessing about being gay if they're not actually 100% out.
So I've spent most of this morning trawling through The Star and other gay periodicals to try and piece together a timeline of Peter's life. It's mostly a few gossip fragments, references to his success at the gay games, and stacks of photos of him advertising City Gym. And then 1991. In amongst the pages filled with notes of love and loss during the worst years of the AIDS crisis, Peter Vincent passed away 1st of December 1991, World AIDS Day. our hero of the 1990 Gay Games, will always be loved. I should have expected this. I'm an historian researching AIDS. Why does this feel like such a gut punch? I think I've been in a whirlpool of desire, fascination, and maybe even a bit of identification. But now I'm convinced I should follow Peter's life in Darlinghurst, even if it does feel a little bit too close for comfort. What might Peter tell me about the experience of the AIDS crisis that I have otherwise been missing?
In our next episode, Leigh takes us deep into the heart of Darlinghurst with our charismatic poster boy, Peter Vincent. How do Peter and his friends cope with this debilitating virus? And what happens to the dancing and the bumping in this newly formed community?
In the past 12 months, have you had any of the following medical conditions? Gonorrhea, yes, no. Syphilis, yes, no. Herpes, anal or genital, yes, no. Swollen glands, lymph nodes for more than 1 month, yes, no. Unexplained weight loss for more than 2 months, yes, no. Diarrhea for more than 1 month, yes, no. Hepatitis, yes, no. How many different male sexual partners would you have during an average month in 1982, in 1983? Have you been to the USA in the past 2 years? Yes, no. If yes, which cities did you visit? And how many sexual contacts did you have in each city? City, sexual contacts, number. Use back of form if insufficient space. Do you use amyl nitrite inhalants? Yes, no. If yes, how many times would you use amyl nitrite in an average month? If you use other drugs, please specify. Type, how often? Do you believe you are at risk of getting AIDS?